everything. It's all there. There are no exceptions. It's all there in the conditional process of the so-called entity. All the potentials are there. You know, this saying, you know, there, but for the grace of God go I, and so forth. You see, in the same circumstance, would you do the same, and so on. All of that. You see? Be grateful you weren't put in such a position. But on the other hand, if anybody did it, you could have done it. That's terrible. It is so. If anybody suffered it, you could have suffered it. Anything that anybody will ever suffer could have been, or could be yet suffered by you. In your case, in the case of the body-mind with which you are sitting on the floor right now. So who's pure? The appearance of being pure is a sales job. It's bullshit. Any genuine purity is not merely a characteristic of the body-mind. It's a divine or ultimate characteristic that has replaced the egoic patterning of the body-mind, but it's not something that the ego can claim. The ego had to be extinguished for such brightness to be manifested. So there's no pride in it, there's no status in it. Realization, enlightenment, these aren't forms of status. People think of them as if they're forms of status. I want to become enlightened, I want to realize, I am your devotee, you see. And just think of all the things you've attributed to yourself over time, both positive and negative. It's all a fiction. It's nonsense. All the good things about anybody could just as well be true of you too. It's just patterning. The totality of mankind is your biography. If you can't know yourself in the form of absolutely everybody, including the worst assholes you've ever heard about, thought about, read about, you see. If you can't understand that that's your potential too, you see, then you don't understand anything about yourself. That doesn't mean go ahead and do it. This kind of knowledge comes through a profound process in which there is the transcending of it. But nonetheless, where there is perfect transcendence, there's a perfect summation of the worst asshole who ever lived. And, in some sense, the best, perhaps. But also, none of it makes any difference anymore. It's canceled. The pluses and minuses add up to zero, and only the brightness remains. There are no lustrous egos. There are official lustrous egos. Mummers, whose role it is to play it in public in various ways, you see. There was a man called Chogyam Trungpa, passed some years ago, who I hear once said, you know, sainthood has fleas. So he did a particular exercise of his own to appear to be a totally flea-covered dog, you see. Well, Well, that was his excuse at any rate, that to try to be saintly was not worth the price, was bullshit, just a way of seeming. So why not be as bad as you can be? Or at least pretty bad. Well, that's been tried. I've had to embrace every kind of play with you all to consider everything.
You used to say, well, that you would relieve us of our guilt by dramatizing it all in front of us during the teaching years.
Yes. All this pettiness, this sex paranoia that's usually part of religion, you see, even esoteric religion, that's all bullshit. I don't want anything to do with it. So I don't put on any kind of quality like that. Have specifically, even you could say, exaggerated the opposite of that, at least at times, for the sake of consideration, but also for the sake of stepping out of the mode, of the mummer's mode, of having to appear that way. That's not what it's about, you see. It's not about the opposite either, but all this phony religiosity that's about manufactured piety and cleanliness, you see, is bullshit. It's social religiosity. It's like technosexual attributes. You see, it's just something you put on, and it satisfies a certain egoic inclination and qualifies you for certain kinds of social status or whatever, prominence for whatever reason, or belonging somehow to some social grouping of some kind, for whatever purpose. It's typical religious behavior. The conventionalizing of the ego through sex-paranoid rules. It's total horseshit. Like, it's best to be single celibate then, so all you just keep your underwear on because you're all being good. No, that's sickening, it's boring, I don't want anything to do with it. People have tried that over and over again, and I kept on telling them that's bullshit, you see? So that's not it. I don't know what you all think I was talking about when I spoke to you last, but I was making the point that real renunciation has a different origin than the egoic motivation toward behavior change or idealized behavior. Most profound renunciation may have the appearance that you would call being celibate, but that doesn't mean it's about being celibate. It simply has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with sex, that's all. It's no heroic self-emasculation job, wearing iron underwear and all the rest, and pretending to be virtuous. In some places, being celibate wouldn't be considered virtue. But as long as you can parade around in some modes of society looking celibate, that gets points, you see, in a lot of places. You can even get a lot of authority by being celibate in various traditional places. And it's a crock. It has fleas. Behind every smiling, self-contented, clean celibate is a secret biography. And everybody has one, whether they describe it or not. So what's the point of pretending it's not so? Really dealing with it is what it's about. That's what renunciation requires. Really dealing with it. So after you've been through the bath from head to toe, then you're sort of cleaned up. But you're only bright because your master patted you on the head.